But we begin with the federal government, which is reimposing some visa requirements on Mexican nationals visiting Canada. It is an attempt to restrict the flow of asylum seekers coming into this country. Our colleagues at Radio Canada broke the story just a short time ago, and my next guest is calling this move unfair. Luisa Ortiz-Garza was born in Mexico City and emigrated to Canada after. She was undocumented in Canada for 13 years until getting her permanent residency, and is now an organizer with the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change. She joins me now from Toronto. So appreciate you joining me. Let me get your reaction to this move by the Canadian government.
Yeah, thank you for having me, but I cannot believe that the Canadian government is imposing these visas in Mexico, and because this process is going to keep refugees from coming to Canada. And you know, Canada is a signatory to multiple refugee conventions, which means that people fleeing persecution and asylum should be able to come here and claim that protection and asylum in Canada. And now that Canada has the legal obligation for those fleeing persecution to take them, and now with this government using the visa rules to keep out refugees, specifically from Mexico, what this is going to do to people is that now they are going to have to go to a consulate in Mexico, and if the immigration officer thinks that they are a refugee, they're going to be denied from coming and seeking the protection that they're looking for and applying for this protection that they're looking for. So what the Canadian government is doing is that they're using this visa process to assess if you are a refugee or you're not a refugee. And what they should be actually doing is to be these people claiming refuge, they should be able to apply here, or there should be a system for them to be able to apply from Mexico. So from tomorrow on, as you said, now that Canada has imposed these visas, right, this is the process that people will have to go through.
So Luisa, you know, the government is doing this after a call from Quebec's Premier François Legault and the impact that he says it's having on social services in that province, and also by the United States, who say migrants have been using the Canadian border to get into the U.S. What do you make of that reasoning?
Yeah, you know, like you said, this change is coming on the heels of Premier Legault complaining about the number of Mexican asylums going into Quebec. But what we should actually be talking about is about the number of international students and foreign workers coming through Quebec to Quebec since he was a premier. And I can tell you that since he was a premier, 160% people have come in temporary permits, either as a foreign worker or as an international student. And what this tells us is that the Canadian government wants to keep people in this temporary cycle of exploitation, making people work here without access to full rights and services and without permanent resident status. And I also work with Mexican farm workers that come here 5, 10, 20, 30 years that have been coming here to grow our food. And they tell me every day about the inhumane labor and living conditions that they have to go through. They have to leave their families in Mexico, and not having full and permanent status often prevents them from speaking up about these conditions. So this system of temporariness, that it just makes easier for the bosses to exploit migrants and deny them from full rights and services that we should all have access to.
So what is your message to the decision makers in Ottawa that are going to be implementing this policy now? Obviously, you want it reversed, but that does not seem likely.
No, but I think what we actually need, we don't need more visas. What we actually need is that the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is to fulfill the promise that he made in 2021. He said more than 2 years ago that he will be creating a regularization program for undocumented people that would grant full and permanent status for all, and also creating programs to give a status for all, including seasonal agricultural workers. So that's what we're asking for. We want full and permanent status for all, so that we all have access to this human services and access to services that we all should have access to.
Luisa, appreciate your time tonight. That was Luisa Ortiz-Garza. She is the organizer with the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change.